Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series. Today is very special. We have Sonita Lontoh with us. Sonita, welcome.
Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I always start with a question about how did you get involved with corporate venturing? Today, we are going to talk about the two big parts of your career, but I just want to get a sense for the first part before we even move to the second part.
Great question. First of all, thank you so much again for having me here today. I would say I got into corporate venture, or let's just use the bigger umbrella under innovation, because I would say when I look back at my career the past 25 years, it had really been at the intersection of new technology or innovation. That is something going on there, would usually then lead to some kind of new business with the new business models. And I've always been involved with companies where innovation is such an integral part to what they do. And many of the companies that I've been involved with, Nicolas, they are, kind of companies that have evolved over a long period of time, let's say 200 years, 80 years. And as you can imagine, for companies to survive that long, they always have to innovate. And in that particular sense, I've always been involved with their new businesses. But as like sometimes doing new businesses internally in a company is not enough. And companies always want to see what else is out there, keep their fingers on the pulse to know what other innovations are going on. And that's how I got involved with corporate venturing as well.
But let's talk about which companies, because you hinted 200 years and 80 years.
Sure.
One, we did the same, which was
Okay.
Siemens.
Perfect. Yeah, so with Siemens, interestingly, before I joined Siemens, I was actually with a venture-backed company called Trillion. It was involved in industrial IoT for the applications of smart grid and smart cities and infrastructure. And then one day I had the opportunity to actually join Siemens, but in particular to actually help launch a new smart energy business, which again is the applications of communications and digital technologies to help customers such as energy companies or utilities or factories to leverage the Siemens digital technologies to improve their operational efficiencies internally. Second, to be able to help provide superior customer experience for their customers. And last but not least, to experiment, like you say, with new business models, usually service-oriented business model. So during my time there at Siemens, I got involved with the Siemens Corporate Venture Group, which I think today is actually called Next 47. But when I was there, it was not called Next 47. And what we did was we also, in addition to having this new business within Siemens, also wanted to see what other innovative companies out there that we might be able to either invest or help as a portfolio company to grow that had technology that are adjacent or complementary to what we were trying to do. Because if you have a new business, especially a new digital business, sometimes an ecosystem is very important because let's say, even though your own technology can be good for platform, but you need to be able to also build applications on top of that. And a lot of the applications sometimes would come from other companies that were not like a part of a Siemens business. So that's really how I got involved into new business plus corporate venturing during my time at Siemens.
And if I remember, you worked for a utility company before PG&E.
Yes, that is true. That's true. That is
so how helpful was it for you to have been on the other side and then work for Siemens on all these innovations, new applications?
Yeah, actually extremely helpful, Nicolas, because PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, who's actually the largest utility in California, is the type of customers that Siemens have for this new business. Because at the end of the day, smart grid, I would say, is really the applications of communications and digital technology connect the whole energy value chain. So from generation to transmission to distribution to distributed energy. Distributed energy just means solar in people's rooftop, batteries in people's homes or buildings. The vision is everything will be connected. If in the old days, the old paradigm, energy is being generated at the centralized generation plant that is usually in a faraway place and then brought into where the demands are. The new paradigm is energy will be two-way communication between the supply and the demand so that you can have a system that is more efficient.
Yes.
I'm sharing that with you because actually in the case of PG&E, it was a vertically integrated utility that's from generation all the way to distribution to the end consumers. But that perspective was very helpful to me because as someone at Siemens who was trying to help customers such as PG&E to embrace, let's just say, technology in order to enable this new energy paradigm, understanding the challenges and opportunity that a customer face is extremely helpful. Because sometimes when you haven't been on the customer side, you actually do not know the type of challenges and opportunities they face.
Yep.
Because sometimes I think solution providers have a tendency, not everyone, of course, I think it's very important for any solution provider to be customer oriented, but sometimes they focus more on their technology. But I think if they understand the customer's pain points, it will be very helpful to be able to marry what it is that they're offering to what kind of benefit that the customers can get.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is technology based too.
Correct.
You haven't talked about your educational background, but it's quite technical to start.
Yes. Interestingly, I got both my undergraduate degree and master's in engineering actually in a technical background, not quite as technical as like electrical engineering and mechanical. I was in industrial engineering and operations research. So it was more about optimization. So we didn't, industrial engineers usually do not make things, but they make things and systems better, more efficient, right? Also got my MBA. But what's interesting, Nicolas, I have never actually been an engineer in any of my career.
Okay.
My career had always been helping engineers who invent something new, apply that in a customer situation where whatever it is that they're inventing can actually be used by customer either to improve their operations internally, either to offer better customer service for their customers externally, or to think of new, usually service-oriented business models leveraging the technology. So my background, I think, in engineering helped me to understand and help engineers to translate whatever it is that they're inventing, and they're all brilliant. They're inventing something great. But sometimes in order to really commercialize it and in order to really make it resonate, the customers, I think, need a different skill set. And I think I have that ability to do that because my educational background was a combination of engineering and business.
I want to click on the Siemens time.
Yeah.
Now that we understand your engineering background, education, your utility background with PG&E, but also the supplier side with Siemens. How much of these three elements together help to identify the right application, the right innovation, and more importantly, which ones would not work?
Oh, wow. Okay. That is a very interesting question. I would say the educational background helped me to understand that each customer is on a journey. Let's just use the framework of, I'm just going to call it digital transformation because like the word.
I like it. And thank you again for speaking for our DX week a while back.
Oh, sure. So a lot of, let's just use energy customers, for instance. The energy customers are undergoing a digital transformation journey, and everyone is at different stages of maturity with regards to where they are on the journey. And I would say my educational background and the understanding of between technology and business, I think really helped in identifying some of the use cases throughout that journey. So I would say the easiest use cases usually has something to do with improving efficiency. That is the lowest hanging fruit, especially if you're helping a customer going through a digital transformation journey. It's very important to be able to show ROI quickly. And so let's focus on use cases that are easy to test, easy to implement quickly and get like a quick return on investment.
Low hanging fruit.
Low hanging fruit. And in the energy infrastructure, usually that has something to do with improving efficiency, let's say in the distribution. So that is one application of smart grid. Because immediately once you do that, you improve reliability, which is extremely important for utilities, reliability of their system. And that is the first that what you do, right? And then usually from that journey, you move a little bit towards the second journey, which is usually improving customer experience. So the applications of a lot of this digital and industrial IoT technology in the energy infrastructure would enable the utility to know, let's say, if there is an outage at this particular customer. Because before that, they were blind. Before they applied this digital technology and sensors, they actually didn't know that. Sometimes they have to go manually check where it is. But with this new technology, they will know immediately and they can send
in the right place.
Yeah, they can send the repair in the right place even before the customer calls, which is a big deal, right? In order to improve customer experience, which, by the way, I think most energy companies are not known for that. Now they understand that there will be more needs in order for energy companies to provide a good customer experience. But usually you don't want to just stop there, Nicolas. Like the highest level and hardest level of, let's say, innovation, leveraging, again, the same technology, is to think of new business models. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of energy companies and utilities, especially with the advent of more distributed energy, which means more solar on the consumer side, more batteries on the consumer side, more electric vehicles on the consumer side, a lot of utilities are thinking of what new business models can they enter that enables this integration of these new, let's call it distributed energy resources onto the grid. And what is the economic model for that? And where should they participate? And so I'm sharing all these things because I think if you only look at it only from the engineering background, you won't think of this. But if you can marry between engineering and business, then you can have this kind of conversation with the customer, and it will make more sense for them, especially for their decision makers, to then be open to try some pilot projects to prove whether some of these use cases actually make business sense for them, if that makes sense.
And so let's talk a little bit on the pilot. To test this engineering and business combination.
Correct.
What is the best practice to have a good, successful pilot?
Yes, I think the best, good, successful pilot, the first, you need to have a hypothesis with regards to the benefit that you think you might be able to realize if you do things, right? So you have to have a hypothesis. And then second, I think you want to do it in a controlled environment. So let's say you're going to test, I'm just going to use this as an example, smart meters. Like you want to see some of the benefit. Don't do a big rollout. Do it very controlled in certain areas only, for instance. But also be careful about the external environment that you may not realize might affect your pilot. For instance, let's say you're going to do a smart meter test, proof of concept or test. Don't do it, let's say, in Central California, where it gets really hot in the summer, and don't do it in the summer. The reason I say that, because if you do it in Central California, which is really hot in the summer, the energy bill will spike that time, which has nothing to do with your smart meter project. It's just the nature of things. But then people might equate that with like customers may think, oh my God, my energy bill goes up because of your smart meters, when in fact it is not because of your smart meter. So make sure the environment is controlled and you do it in the right way, in the right places. And then last but not least, do the pilot where you can see results within a relatively short period of time. So don't do something where the result might take years, right? Do something where the results you can see within the next few months.
Now, one of the challenges with pilots is typically the team wants to validate their hypothesis.
Yeah.
But the biggest value is to invalidate the hypothesis. So how do you make sure that the incentives is well aligned to really be true to the hypothesis?
That is a very interesting question. I would say, I think ensuring that the metrics that you use are the right metrics. And again, sometimes you have to experiment to see which are the right metrics for measurement for that. And Nicolas, I would say the other thing is also making sure maybe some of the incentives, even for the team that is involved with that particular pilot or incubation or project, is different from the incentives from the parent company. Because sometimes when you use the same incentive, whatever incentive you're using for the parent company, usually it's not the right incentive for a small team that is trying to test something out.
I think that's a golden nugget. You have to make sure the incentive is geared for the pilot being successful, which actually doesn't mean that it's proving the hypothesis.
Exactly. Totally. Yes.
So can you talk about maybe something you're proud of your time at Siemens in corporate venturing perspective?
I would say the time that I was proud of, I'm always proud of when whatever we do have a bigger impact for society, because that's when you really feel that you're really delivering real value. So I would say maybe like when some of our projects, we work with a utility customer to enable a microgrid actually at like a Indian reservation, like a remote Indian reservation in California. And we enabled that community to actually be energy independent. They were far from the grid, so they do need their own energy source. And I would say it really helped with the development, economic development for that community. So I would say I was very proud of that project, even though it's a small project, it's a microgrid, but it proved like that you can do microgrid. And then at the same time, you actually help the community at the Indian reservation to have better economic activity because they had them.
Very nice. And so created a new segment in a way for the microgrid.
Exactly. A new segment for the microgrid and also proving that microgrid can work.
Yeah. Which otherwise would probably have been seen as uneconomical.
Yes, exactly. Uneconomical.
I want to move to the next stage, which was HP, where you were the CMO. And I'm sure what you've learned at Siemens was useful also in HP. So maybe we can start with that. What it is that you learned at Siemens that you applied at HP?
I think just to take a step back a little bit, when I was at HP, Nicolas, I was really focused on their new businesses. So actually my first, let's just say project when I was at HP was to help launch their 3D printing business.
I see.
Which is still leveraging HP core intellectual property of microfluidics. It's just being applied to be able to enable 3D printing technology. That was what I did first. And then after we did that for a few years, and the business model there was offering the 3D printing solutions for other companies to use. We had customers like the shoemakers, the car makers, BMW, Volkswagen.
B2B.
B2B. We had all types of different customers. However, again, innovation, very important. The other thing that we wanted to do was to look at what other industries could we potentially disrupt, leveraging the core IP of 3D printing, but where HP could be a player in maybe more of the value chain instead of just selling the solution to someone else. And so during my time there, actually, I helped them to launch 2 new businesses. The first one is called Arise, which is a personalized orthotics, because actually we found out that the orthotics industry was very fragmented. And there is a new way, a better way of providing personalized orthotics for customers through scanning your feet, uploading your data, and then for HP to make the orthotics for you and sending it to you within a week.
And with perfect fit.
Perfect fit, rather than the traditional way where you usually have to go to a doctor, the doctor has to get the mold. It takes a few months for you to get it in a way that is really disrupting the orthotics market, right? And we launched that with a new brand called Arise because HP also understood, I don't think HP is known in that arena. So it's important for us to launch it with another brand that people don't actually associate with HP, even though it was part of our business. And then the third industry that we launched was paper packaging, sustainable packaging. Believe it or not, 3D printing technology is actually a very good fit to make paper bottles. And we saw that there is a macro trend in the world to be moving more towards sustainable packaging. And so we launched a new business called Choose Packaging. Again, we try not to push the HP forward because, again, it's not an industry where HP is well known for. But Choose Packaging is owned by HP, where we make paper bottles, sustainable packaging that being powered by HP 3D printing technology. So those are just some examples of like how far a company, it all depends on your risk appetite. So in the case of Siemens, Siemens wanted to get into new digital arenas, but still within the core competency of energy, factory, health, still within their core competency. I think with HP, what I found was they're very willing, still leveraging their core IP, but very willing to go into arenas where they may not be the kind of known player in those arenas.
Yep.
So those are just some examples of, I would say, corporate innovation and risk.
For the audience, most time when we talk about corporate venturing, we think about CVC. But the
Right.
two examples you gave are much more about ideas that
Incubation.
comes from inside, incubated.
Not necessarily, because I would say in the Siemens experience, sure, the business unit was inside Siemens, but we did work with the corporate venture group very closely to look at what other companies out there that we can collaborate together
Mhm.
with, one day perhaps buying them. And actually we did buy some of them. That
Okay.
was with Siemens. I would say with HP, we definitely launch a business and incubate a lot internally, but we also work very closely with the corporate venture group to look at portfolio companies that actually are aligned with our, let's just say, thesis, to look at either for potential opportunities to work together or for potential perhaps acquisition one day.
I see.
Yeah.
So today we're in the Fenwick office, the
Yes.
GCP leadership
Yes.
event today. And this morning we talked about the challenge of finding the internal talent to incubate the ideas and to make it into a standalone business. Very hard, right?
Very hard, extremely hard. Because I think the challenge, I would say, when you only depend on internal talent, it's not because people are not smart or anything like that. I think it's because people cannot see what they don't see. People just cannot see what they have not seen.
Yep.
And sometimes, Nicolas, as people are being or affected by what they know, it's really hard to see
Everyone.
what you haven't seen. Or so even if you have the asset, even you already have the asset, you cannot see other use cases of the asset. And sometimes you're very influenced by the use cases that you know, especially the use cases that have made you very successful
I
in
see.
the past 30 to 40 years. I think that is the challenge. It's not because people are not smart or anything like that. It's just, it's hard to see what you cannot see.
And so how do you identify these talents and how do you make them see more?
I think our approaches have been to go outside actually for the talent.
Okay.
To go outside for the talent. And in the beginning of incubation, to always keep the incubation separate from the mothership.
Okay.
Of course, it doesn't mean like people from the mothership cannot be part of the business. They usually do. You don't need them as well. They know how to get things done and all that. But it's to keep the new thing, let's just call it separate, long enough until it's of a certain scale before the mothership comes and influence it too much. How about that?
Which I think is a golden nugget about incubation is it's incubation. You have to protect it while it's still fragile and innovating.
Yes.
When it's strong enough, then you can start to.
And there is opportunities for the mothership to help the incubation, especially in terms of channels that go to market. Because sometimes it is easier. The mothership is established. They have a lot of salespeople. They have a lot of distributors, right? As long as whatever it is that you're offering actually makes sense for this channel, right? You can actually use the channel. And when I talk about channel, Nicolas, it's not just channel distributors, but even your own sales force or whatever, because there is scale there. So they can help actually with that. But they should not be, let's just call it, bothering the new business too much with like processes and metrics and all this like legal stuff that the mothership use, because that's very different. Mothership is scale. The new business, not.
Now, there's a challenge, which is the salespeople like to sell what they know sells well.
Yeah.
And suddenly you come with something new, which they're not used to sell.
Right.
How do you incentivize them or convince them to spend time talking to their customer about this?
That is actually a very good idea. You have to definitely incentivize them in the right way, but I also think you need to train them. Because again, depending on your product and who your company is, some salespeople, the product is known. You don't have to explain it. And a lot of these new things, sometimes you actually have to partner with the customer to even make it work, right?
Yep.
And that takes a different kind of skill set, because it's more rather than selling a product that's already made, customer already knows, it's just a matter of price or negotiation or whatever service. This is about selling a vision.
Business development.
Yes, like selling a vision. And so that's a different skill set. So I would say probably you're not going to use the whole sales organization, but maybe a smaller team consisting of people who can actually do this. You have to train them. And then I think you also have to incentivize them the right way. But what we found, at least, because a lot of this new incubation are cool stuff, right? Like 3D printing with HP, digital energy with Siemens, sustainable packaging. Actually, the salespeople love using this little tidbit in their conversation with the higher up in their customer organization to show that you're an innovative company, that you are forward thinking, that you are. It can actually be a plus, I would say.
I've seen the same. I think it can be very positive. It's like you're showing everything that you always show, and then you sprinkle with innovation.
Exactly. Like, hey, by the way, we're also working on some of this cool stuff. It might make sense to work with maybe some of your departments on developing a solution that might make sense for you. And that's usually how it starts.
Now, I want to ask again, beyond the talent that you bring from the external, how do you motivate them to join, knowing that it's going to be incubated inside the company? Most entrepreneurs like to create and have equity in the company. But here it's inside the big corporation.
Right.
You may say that you will protect them, but still, how do you motivate them to join in the first place?
Yeah, I think it has to be a certain type of entrepreneurs, to be very honest with you. I think the pure entrepreneurs who just want to be entrepreneurs probably would not be a good fit for a company. But I think entrepreneurs who see maybe by being a part of a big company can actually help his or her business scale more. So it really depends on the particular solution that they are selling. There is like a good synergy between that company's technology or core IP with your company, the big mothership, distribution channels or product offering. This is like a nice adjacency to it. I think that will make more sense because the entrepreneurs think by combining with this big company, that will help their business scale. Yeah.
In this podcast, I always ask the journey into corporate venturing.
Yeah.
We described your success in corporate venturing, but then it's leading to the second stage of your career. Do you want maybe to share about why you decided on the second stage of portfolio life in a way and the impact you had?
Okay. Great question. First of all, just full disclosure. So I joined 2 of my public boards while still a sitting executive at HP. And so I'm very grateful for that because I think most companies only let the executive sit on 1 public board, not 2. Very grateful HP.
How did you manage?
HP let me do that. So thank you, HP. But I think when I started joining my public boards while still a sitting executive, it provided me with a very good perspective in a sense that governance is very different from operating. And I would say as an operator, we all have been successful because we achieved something. We grew something. We led. We transformed. That's what you do, whatever it is. Yeah. You achieve because you lead, you grow, you manage, you transform. But in a board role, especially for public companies, that's no longer your role. So instead of leading, managing, transforming, growing, actually what you need to do is leverage your experience, operating experience, and be able to convert that into insight and foresights, helping the company see around the corner by asking questions, giving advice. Hopefully they will take it, but it's up to them whether they want to take it or not, and really help mentor and guide the CEO or the management team to navigate material risks and opportunities for long-term value creation for shareholders. So for me, that was really the biggest difference. It was very interesting that, hey, in my day job, I'm growing, I'm whatever, transforming. Yet in my board role, I no longer do that, but I leverage whatever it is that I have had in the past 25 years to help the companies in a way. And then as to how I decided to just go full-time with this, I felt like I'm at the stage in my life where, let's just say, I want to explore other things, Nicolas. People actually do call this portfolio life because you're not retired. You no longer have a day job, but you still do a lot of things. And actually, in my portfolio life, I serve on 2 public boards, 1 private board, and also as an advisor to a VC firm because I want to stay abreast with what's going on. As an advisor to a VC firm, you still have the opportunity to deal with corporate from the LP side, right? And you still also deal with portfolio companies in, again, helping to advise them to grow, to scale, to achieve a lot of things. You're no longer the person doing it.
And maybe I will ask a very tactical question, but
Okay.
do you see a difference between you being a board member of a private company and a public company?
Yeah. Very different. I think in the private company, of course, it depends on who it is, what stage they are. I think you're much more hands-on because at the end of the day, I think most private companies look to their board members for specific, depending on what it is your particular expertise, they look for you to really help them on that. So let's say if you're a capital market person, they might look at you to help raise money or structure the financing in an appropriate way. If you're like me, I'm more of a growth person, probably look at me to help them with what is the right go-to-market strategy, what is the right customer acquisition strategy. So I think private companies, I think much more hands-on. Public companies, a lot of it is about governance, good governance. If you're listed in the United States, the SEC is prominent. So everything you do, you have to make sure that it complies with SEC regulation. You have a lot more scrutiny. Private company, your CEO compensation is not going to be challenged or scrutinized by anyone. Public companies, yes, they look at the proxy, they see how you're compensating your CEO and your named executive officers. People can start doing analysis with regards to what is your total shareholder return the past 5 years, comparing that to your peers, benchmark it, and then look at like, how are you compensating your CEO or executives? I would say public companies are a lot more about governance. Private companies, I think, is a lot more about helping them grow.
And today I mentioned we are GCV, which is all about raising the bar for the CVC ecosystem. But when it comes to board, I think NVCA is doing an amazing job to raise the bar.
Right.
You want to give a little plug for NVCA?
Oh, totally. I think one of the reasons I'm involved with you guys, because to me it's very important. First of all, it's very important for companies to have good board members that are appropriate for where they are in the growth stage. I would say in different growth stages, you need different kinds of board members, right? First of all, I think that is very important for me. And then the second is I'm very passionate about increasing more women on corporate boards. I don't know what the statistics on private companies. On public boards, I think women only make up about 20% of the S&P 500. And like we can increase that.
Yep.
And there are many reasons I would say why women is not quite there yet. I'm very passionate about that. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm really a supporter of new kind of like GPC has a new initiative called the Women on Board, again, to help increase the number of women on corporate board.
and maybe you can share, but being on board of startups that are growing is a really good path, probably, to become board member of public companies. It gives some of the skill set, even though it's very different.
I would say at the end of the day, any board, private or public, they actually want a well-rounded business leader as a board member who is not only good in the particular domain, but also someone who understands the bigger business context, including strategy, including talent, including financing or financials, being able to see material risk and opportunities, again, for long-term value creation. And so I would say if you're in a board member as a startup, as long as you can expose yourself to some of these arenas, I think for a startup usually is about financing and growing, right? Those are important, but I think if your aspiration is to be a public board member, you should also add like some of these other things that public boards need to do, such as understanding audit committees, because at the end of the day, your financial statement, the integrity of your financial statements, very important for public company. So you should expose yourself to other things other than helping the company to raise money and grow.
And in your case, I know for Sunrun, you're on both the audit and the compensation committee. Can you share a little bit? And I think it's useful for the audience. What are the responsibility for each? Which sounds obvious, but it's not that obvious.
It is not obvious, yes. So for the audit committee, the core responsibility of audit committees are ensuring the integrity and accuracy of the financial reporting and controls, which eventually result to the financial statements that people see, the annual financial statement, the quarterly financial statement. And then the audit committee is also responsible to oversee both the internal auditors and the external auditors. Because I think every public company usually has an external auditor provide a third-party attestation of the integrity of their financial statement. A lot of audit committees are also responsible for compliance with ethics and regulations. More and more audit committees are also responsible for the enterprise risk management. And I think in many companies right now, there are a lot of new regulations from the SEC with regards to cybersecurity, climate reporting. You will be required to actually file an 8K 4 days after a material cybersecurity incident. For those companies who do not have a standing innovation and technology committee, which is still rare in public companies, but some public companies do have that. They put that committee. So any reporting, audit committee, which there are pros and cons with that, Nicolas, to be honest with you, because sometimes the audit committee is so overworked. Everything is in the audit committee.
Everything is added to them.
Everything is added to them. So there are pros and cons with that. But I just want to share that as the world becomes more uncertain, risks have become more complex and interconnected. I think audit committees are becoming more busy in addition to core responsibilities of financial reporting. Compensation committee, as the name says, you're responsible to oversee the compensation philosophy and programs for your CEO and name executive officer, which is basically Section 16 officer. There, what you want to do is to ensure that your compensation plan is actually related to performance. That sounds obvious, but there is art and science there, ensure that the compensation is actually tied to performance and also tied to core values and culture of the company that you want to push. And I think a lot of boards also have their human capital management oversight in the compensation committee.
Yeah, and when you say performance, the challenge is the short-term performance and the long-term performance, and not creating incentives where you disconnect the shareholder value creation. So you have some experience. I'm not asking anything that you cannot share, but maybe best practices for a compensation committee member.
I think best practices is always to make sure that the largest majority of the executive compensation is tied to performance. And what I meant by Nicolas is instead of like most people do this, most of the compensation will come from performance-based shares, which is, I think, good practice in general. And then the other good practice is don't use the same method for the short plan and the long-term plan. Preferably you use different types of metrics. And then the other, I would say, best practice is, look at your peers. And in general, you don't want to be too extreme, like either ways. You don't want to be too low. You don't want to be too high. I think somewhere in the median makes sense, because that's a reflection of what is actually the market value of executives in your type of industry.
It sounds, if I'm pushing to the limit, it sounds like then you basically look at the benchmark and try to be in the median.
Or a little bit above the median. If you think you have a very good executives team, you want to be a little bit above the median, but not like crazy.
Now, part of the performance and the compensation sometimes is linked to ESG. And there was a very nice trends about ESG being more and more included in compensation and goals of the company. Now there is a pushback. Shareholders saying, wait, do we really need this? And what's your reaction to that? And maybe how should we think about it?
Sure. Good question. And I think, unfortunately, the term ESG, I think, has become a little bit negative because the truth is it's confusing. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. Those are very different, right? It could be diversity, equity, inclusion. It could be GHG emission reduction. It could be safety. I'm not kidding you. It could be safety. It could be like having a board structure, shareholder values, which usually means like your board needs to be like every year instead of having a staggered election. It could mean many things. So people are like, what the hell? So I think the first thing that companies need to do is to make sure they understand what are important for their stakeholders. So go out there, talk to your largest shareholders, talk to your customers, talk to your employees, talk to the communities, see what are all the different ESG factors that are important for them. But that's not enough. After you take all of them, there'll be a lot. You need to do an assessment with regards to the relevance and the significance of these different factors for your particular business. Again, I love the word material. In the public company world, that word is extremely important.
It has a very strong legal meaning.
Yes, because first of all, SEC only cares if it's material. Second of all, your shareholders only care if it's material. But third of all, you should also care only for things that are material for you. There can be many things out there, but not everything will be material for you. So focus on those ESG factors that are the most material for you, okay? And then second, ensure that those ESG factors are actually integrated into your company's strategy. A lot of companies, Nicolas, unfortunately, they're like, oh, what's our ESG strategy? Oh, okay, it's like it's its own thing. No, ESG strategy has to be integrated into your company's business strategy to manage material risk and opportunities for long-term value creation. If it's in the United States, for shareholders. If it's in Europe or Asia, for shareholders plus other stakeholders. Because unfortunately, that's still the standard. And then ensure that, you do, it's an emerging practice, to be honest with you. It's not for everyone. But I would say they said about 70% of the S&P 500 actually link some kind of ESG metrics to executive compensation. The ESG metrics usually the link the most to executive compensation are first is GHG reduction goal. Second metric is DE&I type of metrics. The third metric is actually supply chain and safety. And so I would say that's good practice. Sometimes you have to do it in different ways. There are pros and cons in how you do it. Do you only put it in the short-term compensation? Do you also put it in the long-term compensation? Do you use a modifier to be able to adjust your compensation up or down, depending on whether the company achieved the goals, right? Or do you want it to be a weighted metric, individual for the individual? Or do you use it as a part of a scorecard that is part of the company's overall strategic and operational metric? There are many ways of doing that. There are many pros and cons. But I would say with all these pushbacks, again, you have to look at what is actually material for you. and just focus on those things that are the most material, and don't worry about the noise. And if you do believe certain things are material for you, but let's say you're in the consumer products industry, there will always be people who are against you, and there will also be people who are for you.
Yeah.
But as long as you stick with your own values and you truly know it is material for you, then you should stick to it.
I really like this framework, and it's another golden nugget. So
Yeah.
maybe let me give you an example, which I think is going to be a good test, which is safety. Clearly, safety is always important, and no one will disagree with that. Do you place it more in the short term or in the long-term incentives, or a combo? How to think about it?
Yeah, I would say safety, maybe it's good to put it in the short-term compensation, in the annual bonus and annual compensation, because it is something that you always want to be there. And maybe every year you can up the goal. Like a lot of people use OSHA recordables as the metric, because that is the metric that you have if there is like an incident. That is the metric you have to actually report to the OSHA if it is recordable. You can start there. Of course, every company is different. Your goal should be 0, but it is sometimes hard to have 0. So you can play around with what would be the goal that makes sense for you. But let's just make sure that every year you improve it a little bit.
What's within control in a way.
Yeah.
And so maybe another way to test it is now on the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Do you see that as same performance, or some should be short-term, some should be long-term because of the way you control it?
Yeah, that is a very, actually, I think a lot of compensation committees are struggling with that. The truth is, even among the 70% of the S&P 500 who have ESG or GHG reduction, I think most of them only put it in the short term.
In the short term.
Yeah, and let me tell you why. Because I understand. I think they have not found a mechanism where they can tie like the long-term goal with the, usually a lot of performance-based shares have a 3-year vesting. As you're aware, I think a lot of boards have not found a way to elegantly align long-term goals of GHG reduction with 3-year vesting period.
It's very hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. I think people are working on it. I think some people are building interim goals and they try to tie it that way. But the truth is, I think today, most compensation committees put it more on the annual incentive rather in a long-term incentive.
And now if I look at the arc of your career, especially for the audience and the women in the audience, what is the one thing that you think really made a difference for your career positively? And what is the one thing you wish you had done to even accelerate that path?
Oh, that is a great question. I think the one thing that had been positive for me that led to many different things had been, I had always wanted to work in an area that is the combination of my passion, skills, and purpose. I'll be honest with you, I didn't always knew what that was, but every time there's an opportunity that came my way, that was the lens, Nicolas, that I had used, and it seemed it had worked pretty well for me. Because the passion is technology and new business. That's my passion. The skills is, hey, I'm pretty good launching new businesses or thinking of new ways to grow. That seemed to be working pretty well. I think I had been fortunate that the arena that I had been involved in, be the smart and all that with Siemens or digital manufacturing and 3D printing with HP, also had that additionality factor where technology not only, of course, everyone is in business to make money. You have to make money. It has to be profitable. It has to be good business. But the thing is also delivering additional impact to the customers, to the environment, right? So that has always good for me. So I'm glad I did that. And I'm glad that was the framework I had. I would say what I wish I had done better was earlier in my career, I was always so afraid of making mistakes. I always wanted to be perfect. And basically by doing that, there are many things I didn't do because I'm like, oh, let's just wait until it's perfect. And then, of course, things were never perfect. And I wish I had felt more comfortable earlier to, it's okay, make mistakes, reflect on it, learn from it, and improve it. Because when you're not making mistakes, that means you are not going outside your comfort zones.
Yep.
And that actually could be a big mistake, right?
You're not stretching yourself.
You're not stretching yourself. So I wish I had just, I wish I had felt more comfortable to just make mistakes earlier in my career. And actually, it's better to make mistakes earlier in your career
Then later.
than later, yeah. But I think in the beginning, I was very like, I want to be perfect. I had to analyze like 100 times. And yeah, exactly.
Wow. I learned a lot today from you.
Oh, thank you.
I really want to thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate your journey, and I can see how your impact has grown and very quickly, even in the Siemens and HP, where you really have tangible applications. But now you are on the board of very successful company. One we didn't even talk, maybe we should talk for 2 minutes, which is Sunrun, which is very important for our planet. So maybe you can share a little bit about this purpose. You talked about purpose.
Yeah, actually, Sunrun is a very purpose-driven company. So Sunrun, just a little bit of a context. It's actually started by, I think, 2 Stanford students, 2006, 2007 timeframe. And the innovation of Sunrun, Nicolas, is actually not exactly on the technology per se, even though today we're building the technology as well, but it was in the business model.
Yes.
So it was actually solar and battery as a service, which truly enabled consumers. So these are people like you and me, these are corporations who wanted to have solar and battery at home to not have to pay for the whole thing in the beginning. They could if they wanted to. Sunrun offered a subscription, let's just call it subscription, where people pay a monthly fee that we believe is less than your utility bills usually, that enable you to have this clean energy that today had also been able to provide more resilience as there are more outages and all
So
that.
many more.
So many more outages. So the solar battery really help, people at home to be able to have more resilient energy. And what is beautiful is over the years, as the company grew, I think the company went public in 2015, but as the company grew, our scale grew as well, meaning like in the past, it's funny, when I was working for PG&E 20 years ago, I was talking about virtual power plant, but it was a vision.
Yep.
Today, actually, Sunrun is able to do that because we have enough scale in order to be able to bid the energy back onto the grid when it's needed or when it's necessary. That's really what we do. But our vision is really to be the trusted energy provider for people's homes. Sure, today the offering is solar and battery as a service, but in the future, we want to offer other things, really enable consumers to have a comfortable, clean, affordable home that is powered by a lot of these, let's just call it smart devices, and energy comes from clean sources.
And if you think about the origin of Sunrun, you could argue the financing innovation was much more important.
Yeah. But I think many people didn't know that, but because you're from the industry, so you know that. But I would say many consumers probably know that. Yes, it was the financing innovation.
Because at the time it was expensive to buy solar. People were not sure about the ROI. Technology was decaying quickly. The financing was a key element.
Yes. Financing was actually the innovation.
Yeah. Thank you, Sonita. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
I have no doubt you have inspired many today in the audience.
Hopefully.
Thank
you so much. Thank you.